Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for, well, Alessandra and Fiona for allowing me to come along and talk about the Faculty Research Governance team. It's something which I enjoy doing a lot. So I'm just going to give a very quick whistle-stop tour, really, around some of the guidance and some of the support that we provide to researchers, both within the faculty and across the university. So just getting controls. So we are a small team that has been set up originally within FBMH, within the faculty, to support a very specific type of research, and that's research which is undertaken in the NHS. The reason why we were set up as a faculty team was because that's where most of the activity and most of the research involving the NHS was being undertaken. But more recently, we've actually aligned and started to join with the university's wider research governance, ethics and integrity team. And as part of that change, we've actually started to support other researchers in the different faculties. So we now work across all faculties in supporting researchers that are undertaking research in the NHS. The move towards closer alignment with the Central Research Governance, Ethics and Integrity team allows us to interact more closely with some of our colleagues who are working on very similar areas. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of the governance and regulatory arrangements and requirements that are in place for the research that we help to support, and also some of the activities that happen within the wider research governance, ethics and integrity team. So for example, a key example really is the work that we do in terms of supporting studies, and the work that our colleagues in the clinical trials team do to support regulated trials of drugs and devices. We work in similar areas, and we cover some of the different regulatory processes, but our focus is slightly different in that we look after different types of studies. There's also overlap in terms of the work being carried out in compliance with the Human Tissue Act and research integrity and misconduct, of course, but we do focus specifically on the support of the studies which are considered to be non-CTIMPs and that are going through NHS REC and HRE approval. HRE is the Health Research Authority. So our focus is on studies that involve human participants, either their individuals themselves or their tissue and their data. And that's the area that we really look at. We have started to increase our involvement with the Data Safe Haven and also the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, which is all related to high-risk data processing and the security arrangements around that, just to add into everything else that we're doing. But I'm not going to focus on that today. I'm really going to just look at the NHS ethics approval process and what we do in that area. Before I move on, I just want to highlight for anyone who's not familiar with research governance sponsorship, which is an aspect of the work that we do. The university acts as a research governance sponsor by taking responsibility for the research that's happening within the NHS. And so wherever the university is taking on that role, and it's in a non-regulated trial, so not a clinical trial of a drug or device, then it will come to our team. So the sponsorship really is that the university's responsibility for those types of studies. So just to give you an idea of the kind of breadth of study types that we are involved with and we have contact with, we cover, as I say, because we cover everything apart from the clinical trials that is undertaken in the NHS, we've got a broad spectrum of study types. The vast majority of studies that come through our team are qualitative studies and qualitative and quantitative methodology studies as well. We do have about a third of the studies that come through are either basic science or they're other clinical trials of a novel intervention. And so we do see through the translation pathway, we do see things that are studies that are coming through which are really focused at the preliminary stages at basic science stages, but all the way through to implementation of an intervention within a clinical setting. So we have to understand the challenges that are in place for all these study types and make sure that we're able to offer support for researchers who are working in slightly different areas. The one thing that all these studies do have in common is that they all work under the UK policy framework for health and social care, and that's the framework that's in place to dictate what we as what the university as research governance sponsor needs to make sure is in place for all of the research that's happening in the NHS, and that really guides what our expectations are in terms of how the studies are conducted and set up. As I say, we only work with studies where the university is responsible and is named as the research governance sponsor. And all of the studies that come through our team, like I say, are applying for NHS ethical approval or approval from the Health Research Authority. So they're the three things that really are common between all of these different study types, although the issues and challenges that each of them encounter are slightly different for the different types. The figures actually and the proportions here are based on applications that we received over the last 2 years, and there was 205 in total. As a general rule of thumb, we tend to have between 350 and 400 sponsored studies active at any one time. So it's a large number of studies, and there's a lot to contend with. But thankfully, we have our processes in place, which means that we can provide the support that's needed to the researchers that are conducting these studies. So just moving on to how we actually do provide that support. I'm going to look at two different aspects really on how we deliver that support. The first is really the guidance that we make available. With that number of studies that are coming through, it's really difficult for us to be able to manage individual queries and really spend that much time with projects to advise on a project by project basis. So we have developed our standard answers, guidance and templates, which we pull together into a faculty research governance pack. And that's available to download from the university's website, and it provides up-to-date guidance on lots of different aspects of what we do, and it really is our central resource for anybody who's going through the process or is setting up a study within the NHS. We also like to be available for research teams, and so we have set up a number of research governance clinics that researchers can book into if they've got any specific queries. We actually trialled a pre-application meeting for quantitative and qualitative studies, and that was the aim of that really was to try and preempt some of the issues that we do see when we get applications coming through to us, and that they actually work really well, and we're going to try and extend them to different study types. We also like to be involved with delivering training sessions, and we're involved with the new academic programme, but we also do training sessions for on the divisional basis and sometimes for individual research groups, and we go along and update on the latest guidance that's out there for studies that are undertaking work in the NHS. The other thing that we spend a lot of time doing, but actually is one of the most important thing, and I think the thing that has most impact really is the signposting that we do. One of the issues that we have with studies that are going through these external processes is that it can be really difficult to navigate and to identify just what needs to happen in what order. It can be really confusing, and it can be confusing for teams that are going through the process for the first time, but it can also be confusing for teams that have been through it several times but are having to contend with changes to the processes and the guidance that's out there. So we retain a lot of expertise and experience within the team, and we use that to guide people and to direct them to areas of more specialised resource, or if they need to have a specific query that we're not able to help them with, then we'll obviously signpost to the right team. And actually, when we're considering the university as being sponsor, I mean, it's quite often the case that our team is considered to be the sponsor, but we're not. It's the university, and there's so many different offices and colleagues that are involved in the whole process of sponsorship and making sure that all the arrangements are in place. I've just listed a few here, and these are the teams that we tend to have most contact with on a daily basis, really. So whenever setting up agreements, it goes through contracts team, issues around data, which are very common actually. Data queries tend to be the things that get picked up most, both in terms of the reviews that we carry out, but also externally as well, that the external organisations want to have a lot of reassurance, obviously, about how data is going to be processed. research IT in the insurance office, again, data again with the research data management service and about how to share and store data. And sometimes, you know, when it's a case of using third parties, then it may involve the procurement office. So these are the offices and these are the colleagues that are involved with setting up these studies. Many of the research teams will have already had contact, but where they haven't, then these are the our kind colleagues that we refer people to with any specific queries. So that's the guidance that we give in a more general kind of a more general level, and we respond to queries and obviously provide that guidance. On the other side, we also have a number of key processes that we follow, which means that we have specific interactions with research studies as they are being set up and conducted. And I've just used this very, very simplified diagram of a study setup, and of course it never ever happens like this, but if we just use this example of going from study design to generating the research outputs, I can highlight where we tend to have most interaction with individual projects. So the first thing that the first main contact that we have with an individual project is when researchers have identified that they need to get, they're going to be undertaking the research in the NHS, they need to get NHS ethical approval and or Health Research Authority approval. And so the protocol has been developed, it's been designed, the application form has been completed, and once it's almost ready to go, it needs to be signed off by the university as sponsor, and it's at that stage that we review the application when it comes in. And that's quite an intensive process for anyone who may have been through it before, but it's purposefully that way because what we want to do at that stage is we want to identify any particular issues. We want to make sure that the research study is aligned with both the HRA requirements, but also the university's requirements in terms of policies. This is another opportunity where we can refer researchers to our colleagues in the different offices if there's any particular issues that may need to be addressed. So it is quite an intensive process, this, but we actually find that the work that's done at this stage saves time at the end. So actually, it does tend to iron out any potential issues rather than finding them out at the last minute. So that's our main contact, and that happens for every study that we sign off. So the last count is probably about an average of 100 and just over 100, 145 applications a year we tend to go through in terms of our sponsorship review and authorisation process. So once we've signed off the application, it gets submitted for regulatory approval. So that's the NHS ethics approval and the Health Research Authority generally. We then need to make sure that everything is in place for the study to start. So we will work with the research teams at that stage just to make sure that anything that was picked up at the sponsor review stage or any outstanding issues that needed to be put in place, for example, contracts, are in place before the study can start. And then we give the formal sponsor green light for that study to start. And once the study started, the contact that we have after that really does depend on the type of study and the input that may be required by the research team and the kind of activity that's going to be taking place for the study. So whilst the study is being conducted, we may receive some amendments to the study if the research team want to make changes. They may be selected for an audit. There are reporting requirements that are in place, and we interact with the teams in order to be able to remind and advise of the reporting requirements for individual projects. If there are unfortunately any adverse events or any incidents that happen, then the research teams will come to us and we will obviously work through any of those potential issues and see if there's any corrective or preventative actions that need to be taken in terms of patient safety or the study itself. But that can depend. Some studies we have very little interaction once it's started, other ones we have quite a lot. We have a number of amendments sometimes that come through for some of those studies. And then the final main part where we have the contact is at the end of the study, and we make sure that all of the issues around closing out studies, such as what's going to happen to the data, have the participants been informed, has the ethics committee been notified that the study's ended, have the sites been notified that the study's ended. At that stage, we go through a number of different requirements that may be in place for that particular study, and we make sure that those things are in place so that then the research team can go forward and either publish or move on to the next phase of their research. And even though I've kind of presented this as, this is our key interactions and this is the point we have contact, at each of those stages, we do try and guide and offer support at those stages, so that the research teams that are going through the process have as much understanding and basically anything that they need in order to be able to get to the next stage. And that really is our priority, is to try and make the whole process a bit easier, and wherever we can, just provide that advice and that guidance. So in terms of who we are as people, so alongside me is Stacey Bodie, who's the Research Governance Officer, and Vivian Atterbury, who's the Research Governance Support Officer. We're actually, we have a vacant post that we will be advertising very soon for another Research Governance Support Officer. So, you know, spread the word. We're also available, we update, you know, on our Twitter and our website with all our latest updates. But really, as I said at the beginning, our Faculty Research Governance Pack is the place where we have most of our resources, and that's where we would direct people to if there was any questions. And our email's there, and we're always open by email, so any questions, then people can just let us know. And that's the end of my brief overview.